Hello and welcome to Melee's Turnwheel, the series that takes a retroactive look at the Fire Emblem series chapter by chapter. I'm your host, I'm Melee Kirby, and today we're taking it back to chapters 14, 15, 16, 17, and 17X of Fire Emblem, The Blazing Blade. I am excited today, folks, mostly because we are actually going to be talking about some good chapters for the first time in what feels like a very long time. The last time that we played a chapter that I genuinely thought was good was like chapter 22 of FE6. So it's been a little while. The early FE7 maps, both like the Lin mode maps and the early Eliwood Hector mode maps, are just so dull and so boring. And I feel like, I don't know how much this came through. I didn't mention it explicitly, but even putting that aside, I don't know how much it came through. But I was really starting to feel the drag there. Just having 4 episodes in a row of just mediocre map after mediocre map was really starting to get to me a little bit. Especially since the story wasn't really any good either. Even when I was in Thracia, for example, even when I had, all those kind of mid maps or bad maps right in a row, I at least had the story and the characters to get me through. Honestly, the story and the characters up to this point haven't really been anything special, especially now that I'm separating into the conversation around the characters as being more relegated to the SSS episodes. So yeah, overall, I'm was really starting to kind of get some fatigue there. I think that's probably part of the reason why it took me so long to get through those first few episodes of FE7. But now that we're finally in it. Not every chapter today I'm gonna be talking about today is great, but several of them are pretty good. And then I'm excited because next episode we're actually gonna be playing some of my favorite chapters in the whole game. So I'm really looking forward to that. Before we get into the episode in any amount of depth, though, I'm gonna go ahead and read the answer, singular, that I got for last episode's question, which was, what is your favorite convoy system in the series? At Ufel says, FE4, it's so unique and it also makes every decision count because gold is personal too. It makes each unit's inventory feel like theirs. I think that's a fantastic answer. And so, funny story, when I proposed this question, I hadn't even considered FE4 as an option, because I think, you could argue that that's not really a convoy system in the same way that, the more traditional convoy systems work. Because FE4 does have a regular convoy. It's just, personalized for every unit. But if we're talking about, if we're including the pawn shop, which I think it's perfectly reasonable to do, it just didn't occur to me in the moment. If we're including the pawn shop, I absolutely agree that FE4 is the best. I had to, I was thinking, because obviously, the obvious answer to this question is the more modern games, right? Where the Lord is just the convoy, and there's not anything more complicated to it than that. It's a function that, it's one of those things where convenience is sort of king, and I can understand why, as the games got more and more, especially, the more modern games, but, even like FE8, I think works this way, it's just really convenient to have your Lord be the convoy, and it's makes a lot of sense why they would do it like that, even if it's not necessarily particularly interesting. And so I was sitting here I could say FE6 or FE7 because both of them are kind of interesting. They have their own unique advantages and disadvantages, but realistically, right, I'm not going to give either of them the win here over the more modern system. But thinking about it, no, I honestly think that FE4 system might be better. It's not better, obviously. It's for the purposes of FE4, I think it is fantastic. I think it adds so much to that game in a way that a more convenient convoy system just doesn't add to any of the modern games, which is fine. It doesn't always have to add something to the experience, but I don't know, it's just cool, right? It makes the game feel a lot more unique, and the hassle that comes with it is not. It doesn't even really feel like a hassle most of the time because it's just. It's just part of what makes FE4, and I really enjoy it. So I completely agree with you. I think that that FE4 is the best convoy system in the series. Followed by probably the more modern conventional ones where the Lord is the convoy. it just makes the most sense to do it that way. So I get why they've moved in that direction and haven't really moved away from it. I'm pretty sure that's how it works in Engage as well. I don't remember, but pretty sure that they've just started doing that for every game at this point. Okay, well, thank you very much, Ufel, for your response. And I think with that out of the way, because that was the only response we got this time, I will go ahead and ask the next question, which I once again did not think of before I started recording. So, give me a second. Okay, I got one. We're gonna meet a really interesting dark mage today, or shaman, I believe they're called in the GBA games. So what I want to know this time is, who is your favorite dark mage / shaman in the series? I've been pretty good, I think, about not asking too many of the who's your favorite character from X class. I'm pretty sure the only one that I can think of that I did something around Pegasus Knights, I think, for FE6. But for the most part, I don't think that I've been exhausting too many of those questions, because I don't want to go through all of them and then suddenly I don't have anything to fall back on in later episodes. So I'll keep that in mind moving forward to not overuse that too much. But I think it fits here because I think Canas is or Canis. I used to say Canis, but more recently, because I hear people call him Canas, I've been pronouncing it more like Canas. So I'm flip flopping back and forth between those two. Not sure. Anyway, who is your favorite dark mage in the series, and why, preferably? Let me know. Tweet your answers at ImAMeleeKirby, or respond to the post I'm going to put up after this episode goes up. Or email your responses to turnwheelpodcast@gmail.com. All right. Now that that's done, we can go ahead and get into our episodes for the chapter. Yep, that's it. I got it in one. We can go ahead and get into our chapters for the episode, starting with Chapter 14, which is called False Friends. So the opening narration for this map talks about Darin. Darin is the Marquess of Laus. And this opening narration, I mean, it's really short and basic and doesn't really tell us anything that we wouldn't have been able to just infer. But it got me thinking about like what the omniscience of this narrator was like, because they describe Darin as power hungry. He's a power hungry fool, you might say. Now, here's my question about that. Is that like a reputation that he has developed? Do people know that he's power hungry? Or does the narrator have like the narrative omniscience to know that he is power hungry outside of the confines of like the knowledge that we have obtained so far in the story? That's my question. And obviously doesn't fucking matter. I'm thinking way too hard about this. But, I mean, it makes me think, right? Like, if he has a reputation for being power hungry, then, I mean, like, why? Give us a little bit more context on that. But also, like, what, like, has Ostia done anything about it? Like, has Hector's dad, or Uther, have they, like, done anything to like put a limit on Darin's power? I'm curious to hear about that stuff. But what's more likely is probably the writers just kind of like knew he was power hungry and just kind of like threw it in there because they thought it would be obvious. But unfortunately, they didn't account on some 25-year-old white guy in Massachusetts overanalyzing every single line of dialogue in the series and calling them out on it. So checkmate, I've won. Now, after we get through that opening narration, there's a little bit of a conversation with Eliwood. Actually, this might have been part of the opening narration. I don't remember. Let me double check. Unfortunately, I do have to use the bad wiki for this, because I'm pretty sure. Actually, let me double check, because I'm pretty sure the good wiki doesn't have scripts. Oh no, wait, hold on. It does. Okay. Yes. Okay. It is in the opening narration. It describes. I'll just quote it. in Eliwood's heart, the need for truth is drowned in fear, a fear of what that truth may hold. Now, this is something that got brought up in the last episode, chapter 13, I believe it was, as Marquez Santaruz was dying. It got brought up that Eliwood's dad seemed to be in support of this rebellion plan against Ostia, and that became like a little bit of a sticking point for them for like one cutscene before they all moved on. But Eliwood here is still like unsure of what to think about that. What I find interesting about this, and I guess I'll just go ahead and spoil this now. We don't, unless I'm forgetting, we really don't get a proper answer to this. It's kind of left up to interpretation. It's not really. Like, it's pretty heavily implied that for some reason, despite not agreeing with what Darin was doing, he decided to show up and pretend that he supported. Unclear why that would be. Possibly because he knew that the Black Fang was behind Darin and wanted to learn more. Unclear, but we'll get more into that later. I find it interesting that Eliwood is so worried about this, and it's a repeated plot point. It comes up multiple times, but it just doesn't really go anywhere. Not really sure what that's about. I feel like that's maybe a little bit of a missed opportunity. To have there be like again, this is like, you know, I've mentioned this a few times in like like FE4 and FE5 around like intrigue. And I think I was a little bit too dismissive in some of those previous episodes around like, you know, obviously it's good to have intrigue and like mystery elements in your story or like questions that need answering. But if those questions don't have payoff, then it's going to feel unsatisfying. I think that I've said some things in the past that have implied that just like any time a story makes you think, ooh, like what's going on here, it's good automatically, even if the payoff is bad or non-existent. And I don't feel that way. I think that in general, like obviously it's good to raise those kinds of questions, but only if you're going to answer them. So in this instance, I do think it's a little bit weird that they continue to insist on this coming up over and over again, but you know, whatever, I guess. So we get an enemy POV here. Darin is talking to the guy Ephidel that we met last chapter, the guy who was sort of whispering in Hellman's ear. He is talking to Darin and sort of persuading him into going along with this plan. He basically, the implication as we go on through these few chapters is that like this is ultimately Ephidel and whoever Ephidel is working for pulling the strings, using Darin as a tool, and sort of making him think that it's his idea. Now, Darin is a fucking idiot, like really stupid, so he kind of goes along with this without too much of an issue, even though it really doesn't make any sense. And we see this over and over again in this initial cutscene. It's really just like, you know, he's like, oh, you know, our rebellion plan is going badly, Darin, and he's like, you know, and Darin's worried. The main thing here is that Eliwood knows what's going on, or at least Darin thinks he does, and he is actually under the impression that Darin is on his way, or that Eliwood is on his way to Ostia to tell Uther, because you have to pass through Laus to get to Ostia. So Darin thinks that Eliwood is about to spill the beans about the whole rebellion plan, and he's very worried about that. He very much does not want that to happen, so he decides he's going to stop Eliwood here. Regardless of what Eliwood actually wants, he is going to stop him here to make sure that he never makes it to Ostia. We see Eric. Eric is not really particularly noteworthy, except for the fact that he is the boss of a similar chapter, and it's actually the exact same map, basically, or at least very similar. In FE6. Chapter 4 of FE6 has Eric as the boss. It also takes place in Laus. And in that game, Laus also betrayed Lycia. So clearly something's going on here where Laus, like for whatever reason, they just don't want to do anything bad to Laus. But either way, Eric in that game is kind of pathetic. He's still kind of pathetic here. There's some funny lines about him being like, you know, like he's like, oh, you guys were so good at everything you tried. And then Hector's like, if you cared or tried at all, then maybe you would actually have gotten anywhere. There's some fun banter here with him, not in this specifically this scene. He just kind of says like, yes, father, I'll go fight Eliwood. But later on we get some scenes between him and Eliwood and Hector. Hector and Oswin have a fun scene here. It's very simple. In fact, I was gonna skip over it until I reread it and saw that basically, they're just talking about like what's going on. Oswin tells Hector to like be careful or whatever, and Hector says, "Yes, mother, I will," which I just thought was funny. Basically, like the idea here is that Eric is coming out to parlay with Eliwood under false pretenses, like, what's going on, Eliwood? How you doing? It's been a while. With the idea being that will lure them into a false sense of security, where they can then attack. They figure out the trap very quickly. And it turns out it turns into a battle, and that's how the chapter begins. Oh, this is funny because if you actually like read the dialogue that Eric is saying, he's telling on himself so badly. It's like it's never been more obvious that he's up to something. He's like, "Oh, have you been in communication with Ostia? Please tell me, when was the last time you talked to someone from Ostia?" It was like so fucking crazy, dude. He's such an obvious narc. I'm just reading back my notes and remembering stuff that I had forgotten. Hector trash talking an elderly woman. You're close to death as it is what I have written in my notes. So Eric, I'm jumping all over the place a little bit, but let me try to get back on track. Eric, realizes the jig is up and backs off, and the battle starts. Once the battle starts, Eliwood and Hector are approached by an old woman who, I don't remember what context Hector says, you're close to death as it is, but basically she introduces herself as Hannah and says that she is a fortune teller. And as a fortune teller, she is able to give sort of an outline of what the battle ahead might look like. If you go into the battle preps menu, there is I think it's under like tactics or something. I don't know, but it's like a sub menu. You have the option to see augury. I don't know how to pronounce that word. It's under the same menu. We actually might talk about this next time. I didn't really poke around in this menu at all, but it's in the same section as like your ranks and stuff like that. So we'll address that maybe next time. But yeah, if you go into the augury, you pay 50 gold, and she will give you sort of an idea of what to expect in the next battle. Most of it isn't really stuff that you wouldn't be able to get just by looking at the map. Like, for example, in this map, she tells you to bring a lot of horse slayers or weapons effective against cavalry, and it's like, okay, I could literally click check map and see that there are like 12 billion horseback units, and probably could have figured that one out. The more useful thing that she does, though, is that she will give you hints as to who, like, if there's a character who is going to be recruitable that map and you need a specific character to recruit them, it lets you know to bring them. This is honestly really, really nice because it, wait, shit, was this an FE6? Hold on a second. Okay, yes. So the augury mechanic is in FE6. It just works completely differently though. Okay, I got confused because I remember there being a menu where Elfin would like tell you things, but no, it's not the same thing. That's basically just like the ranking system. They cleared that up a lot more in this game. You just get you get your ranks available to you at all times instead of a weird like, oh, you're doing pretty good in this, or oh, you're not doing well in this at all. But anyway, what this augury does, in addition to giving you an idea of what sort of units you might run into, it can tell you if there is a character who's recruitable. It will tell you who you need to bring to recruit them. It's really helpful because in FE6 this happened. Most Fire Emblem games, I think especially the older ones, 5 this probably happened a bunch, but I remember especially in FE6 where there would be units that you could recruit. And it would not at all be obvious as to like who you need to bring to get them, like Shin, or actually that's not true. Shin had like a cutscene explaining it. I'm trying to think of a good example. I thought I had one, but I forgot it. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. Oh, like Klein, like some characters. Most of the time, it was like relatively obvious. But there were points in FE6 where it would have been really helpful, I think, to have someone to tell you, yes, you need to bring this character or this character. For example, in this case, we get Urk back this chapter, and in order to recruit him, you need to bring Sarah. So she tells you to bring the chatty cleric or something like that. It's funny. Oh, worth mentioning, for whatever reason, this isn't in Hector mode. I mean, it's fine. It doesn't matter. Like, if you unlock Hector mode, then you already know everything about the game anyway. Like, because you've already beaten the game once. Although, to be fair, there are some Hector mode exclusive chapters that would maybe be nice to get this sort of information for. Like Chapter 15, Chapter 19, XX, stuff like that. Maybe it's just not in Hector hard mode. I don't know. Maybe it is in Hector normal mode. I'm not sure. But it was not... When I was playing Hector hard mode, I was not able... There was no augury, and Hannah just never showed up. So, doesn't really matter, but I thought it was worth mentioning. I'm going to try to go through for most chapters and see her do her thing. And if there are any like particularly noteworthy or interesting auguries, then I will mention them. But otherwise, it'll just... Just assume that I'm reading it and keeping it in mind in the background. I already talked about Merlinus. We get the full explanation of how he works here. I'm not going to go over it in a lot of detail again, because I did talk about it a fair bit last time. But the short version is that you have the choice every map to deploy him. If you do deploy him and he survives the map, he will level up. When he reaches level 20, he'll promote to a basically the same thing that he is in FE6, where he can move around. There's never any reason to not deploy him. Keeping him alive during some maps is like not always super easy, but for most maps it's pretty easy. And the more important thing is that there's no benefit. Like you even if you can't keep him alive, like having him on the map at all is better than having him on the map for no time at all. So there's absolutely no reason to not deploy him every single chapter, which I think is kind of what was missing to make this system like work. But yeah, if there was some sort of benefit to not deploying him, then that maybe would be a more interesting choice. But as it stands, you really can just, deploy him every chapter, and there's no real downside. If you don't deploy him, then any items you get that you need to send to the convoy, you will just have to throw out because there's no convoy. You can't buy excess weapons. Like if you can only buy as many as you have room for in your inventory. And the same also applies if Merlinus is quote unquote killed, because he can die in this game without losing his without permanently dying. So deploying him and keeping him alive is pretty important. And I just kind of think it's silly that it's optional to deploy him. You should just sort of deploy him automatically in every map. Kind of weird. Merlinus does actually have supports, and we can get into him a little bit as a character when we do his SSS episode. I believe he supports with Marcus, Nino, and Vida, which are three very interesting choices that I'm excited to talk about. But for right now, just keep in mind that Merlinus will be coming with us for pretty much every map. So we see the cutscene of Urk asking around a village for help. He's escorting. He's on another escort mission. Basically, he's trying to get a girl out of Laus, essentially. But I guess Marquess Laus has made it so that it's like he's actively looking for her, basically, and saying like, oh, she can't leave. So nobody is willing to help him because that would involve directly defying Darin, and nobody wants to do that. So Urk is kind of like a little bit unsure of what to do. He just kind of like comes out and of the village and decides he's gonna chill. You can recruit him with Sarah. I've already talked about how Urk is, but in case you want a refresher, he's a mage. He is like decently good. The main thing is that he is, other than I guess Lucius, the best option you're gonna have for like good staves. I don't think there's really as much of a need for staff users in this game, especially considering you get like Priscilla and Lucius are like the only two you are going to need for the majority of the game. By the time you get to like the late game where warp skipping becomes like, super common and easy, you're going to get Pent, who is also really good at using staves. So the reason I bring that up is because I know a lot of people bring up Urk as being like a good for staff utility. I think he's useful in like LTC playthroughs, But just for casual, like, he's not, like, his staffing is not gonna really matter that much, I don't think. And in terms of combat, like, if you put the time and effort into him, especially in Lin mode, he's gonna come out pretty good. But, you know, if you're going off of just Eliwood and Hector mode, or I guess just Hector mode, because Eliwood mode is, like, whatever, it's piss easy. Not the best. Certainly there are, I do like using him a lot, but he's not, like, phenomenal or anything. He's not, like, you know, super good early game mage.jpg, you know, like Asvel or even like Loot, I think is probably better than him, but pretty good still, pretty good. I enjoy using him. I think he's a fine unit. Magic units in this game just aren't, I don't want to say they're not as good, but like there's less of a priority on magic units just because like your physical units are so good and can just kill everything anyway, so I don't know. I've never felt like using Urk was particularly, like, making the game easier on me or anything like that. So this map is structured very similarly to FE6 Chapter 4. As I said, it is a very similar, if not identical map. Except the goal here, rather than seizing the castle, is just route. So you're going to want to move over to the west and kill as many enemies as you can along your way. There are 2 villages to protect. And there are bandits coming from the north and pirates coming from the south. Again, very similar to FE6. They basically just copied and pasted this map wholesale. It's not too hard, especially if you just send like Marcus or whatever, to visit the bottom village, which is by far the more important one, because that is where you recruit Priscilla. Priscilla is a new recruitable unit. You can visit it with anybody. It doesn't have to be Urk. She just comes out and joins you. She is a troubadour, so a mounted healer. And for that reason, she pretty much completely invalidates Sarah. Sarah is a fine unit. I don't think she's bad by any means. But if you're looking for staffers, I think both Priscilla and Lucius outclass her quite a bit. We're going to talk about Lucius later on in this episode. I guess we've already talked about him, but we get him back later this episode. Yeah, I mean, that's really all there is to it. Like, she's good. She has good growth rates. She has, like, a decent, I don't even know what her base staff rank is. I think it's, like, C, maybe. So she's a solid unit all around. Yeah, C rank stabs at base, and like good growth rates for the most part. So she'll be fine. She'll be pretty good at healing, which is pretty much all she needs to do. When you recruit her, Priscilla talks a little bit about why she's in Laus. Apparently, she's looking for her family. She doesn't give any more detail than that. She just says that she heard a rumor that they were in Laus, and when she actually came here to investigate, the Marquess found out about her and is trying to keep her here, presumably to, like, you know, proposition her, like keep her as like a bride or something. I don't know. Only bad things, I'm sure. Darin is a piece of shit. It's worth mentioning that Priscilla will join your army regardless of whether you visit the village or not, as long as Urk is still alive by the end of the map, and you protected the village from the bandits. So, as long as all those things are true, she will still join you, which is kind of funny because that is not always the case, as we will see a little bit later. After a certain number of turns, Darin starts to realize that the battle is not going swimmingly, and Eliwood uses this opportunity to convince him that the best course of action is to leave behind half of his army and his son and leave Laus to go do something else. I say do something else because it's not entirely clear what his goal from here is, but Eliwood successfully convinces Darin that he should leave, and so he does. Not his brightest moment. I'm going to be saying that a lot, because Darin is honestly comically stupid. He's really funny. It's really funny how easily taken advantage of he is. But yes, he just abandons Eric outright. It's around this time that the rain is going to start. Unfortunately, this is another map with a weather condition. Rain will come and will make it harder for you to traverse the map. Thankfully, it's only for a couple of turns. I think it's on and off. I'm not sure if it comes more than once. You should probably have the map beaten, but maybe not by the time it comes for the first time. I certainly never have it beaten that quickly. But if it comes a second time, I've never seen it, is what I'm going to say. Oh, and when you have Hannah, she will. I mean, you always have Hannah. I guess you don't have the option to not recruit her on Eliwood mode. She will warn you of when the rain is about to start. She'll say, "Oh, my old bones are aching. It's gonna rain," or something like that. So, Keep that in mind. It'll at least give you an idea of when the rain is coming. I guess in Hector mode, it just doesn't. It just jump scares you out of nowhere, which sucks, but it is what it is. Once you successfully defeat everybody, when you kill Eric, you actually capture him, obviously, because he needs to still be alive in FE6. So you capture him, and Eliwood and Hector interrogate him to try to get some information out of him. He's pretty forthcoming with the information. I think Eliwood is able to appeal to, like, oh, my father is missing, please. Like, we both love our father so much. Please help me find mine, that sort of thing. He tells them about Ephidel and how Ephidel has sort of been influencing Darin. He talks about how, Darin has always felt that Ostia was not the right territory to rule over Lycia. He felt that it should be Laus. But he never really went anywhere with that idea until one day Ephidel showed up. He says that Ephidel had something that he showed to Darin. I'm not sure what that could be. I don't think that's ever properly explained. But that was when he really properly started putting these rebellion plans into motion. Apparently, Marquez Santaru's Hellman was all for the idea. But so, allegedly, was Eliwood's dad. And obviously Eliwood is in disbelief about that. And Eric doesn't really seem to care. Just like, believe me or don't, your choice. He does say that Elbert argued with Darin over whether Ephidel should be involved. So he says, Elbert supported the plan for rebellion, but he said that Ephidel and the Black Fang needed to get the fuck out. It was not, they shouldn't be involved. And Darin absolutely refused, so they had a big fight, and Elbert left. Upon hearing this, Oswin approaches Hector privately in a scene that I really, really like, and basically says, listen, Eliwood's dad supported this rebellion. I don't think that we should be helping Eliwood anymore. And Hector is pissed off about that. He says, take that back right now, etc., etc. There's even a moment where Hector, Oswin's like, listen, I know how you feel. Hector says, okay, I'll tell you what. You are not my vassal. You are my brother's vassal. Your duty is to Ostia. If you want to leave me and go back to Ostia, that's fine, but I'm sticking with Eliwood no matter what. And after that, Oswin decides that he is going to pledge his loyalty not to Uther specifically, but now more directly to Hector. He apologizes for what he said about Eliwood and has declared his loyalty to Eliwood, or to Hector. So it's a pretty good scene. And then, Hector and Eliwood just have a brief conversation where Eliwood renews his resolve to find his dad and clear all this up, prove his innocence, etc., etc. Honestly, the first interesting turn that the story has taken, still some problems. I don't like how stupid Darin is being. I think that, now that having played the game before, I know that the Elbert stuff doesn't pay off, but it's interesting enough for while it lasts. Pretty alright story beats in this one. I think they're pretty cool. I honestly thought that, and I'm not sure, maybe they had a conversation last chapter as well, but I had thought that Oswin and Hector had already talked about Eliwood's dad possibly being involved in the rebellion, but I must have misremembered, because I'm pretty sure this is the first time it's come up. But still remains to be seen how they will carry this through moving forward. So I think that's all that I had to say about False Friends. I think we can go ahead and move along to Chapter 15, which is called Talons Alight. Now, what's interesting about this map is that this is our first Hector mode exclusive map that does not have a parallel in Eliwood mode. So, for example, we had Taking Leave in, I think that one was Eliwood mode. I don't know. One of them was Eliwood mode, and then the other one was exclusive to Hector mode. One was exclusive to Eliwood mode, and one was exclusive to Hector mode. But they were still both Chapter 11, and then they converged into one. This is one that is this map, Talons Alight, is only in Hector mode. There is no Chapter 15 in Eliwood mode. I mean, there is. The numbering is all fucked now, though, because Chapter 15 is now Hector mode's Chapter 16. It just goes straight to the next chapter. So, obviously, I take notes for both Eliwood and Hector mode. Most of the time, there's not going to be a difference. Obviously, that scene that I just went off on in is only in Hector mode, because Eliwood wasn't there for that, so he wouldn't have gotten that information. But for the most part, there are no differences. In this case, though, obviously I'm only going to be talking about Hector mode, because it's only in Hector mode. So keep that in mind. I really don't like this map narratively, because it really does feel just kind of shoved in for no reason into Hector mode. Basically, the gist is that we are basically waiting to hear more information about what's going on with Darin, like where he ended up. So we're just chilling in the castle, basically, which I don't know. It feels like a kind of a weird excuse to have time for a map, but it is what it is. They just wanted to put a map here, I guess. Oswin approaches Hector and Eliwood to let them know that they are under attack. Eliwood chimes in that there is a mercenary group that has historically been very loyal to House Laus for whatever reason, and that their leader is called Eubins, and he's referred to as the Hurricane. This is a mistranslation, and because there's another character named the Hurricane later on in the game. That one's correct. We have two characters named Hurricane. One is correct. The other one is a mistranslation, I guess. We also get a little cameo here from Heath, who is a character that we're going to be seeing later on in the game. Now, obviously, in the context of having played... Like, if you're playing this map, it means you're playing Hector mode, and if you're playing Hector mode, that means that you've played Eliwood mode, so you know who this is already. And this is just kind of like a little, oh, hey, see, he was chilling here from the start. But yeah, we're not going to talk about him at all until later. Okay, so I'm looking at the script right now, and there is a section for the augury here. I'm pretty sure, I mean, this must mean, because this is a Hector mode exclusive map, it must only not be available in hard mode. So in Hector normal mode, I guess this is still here. This is a defend map. It's the first one that we've seen in Eliwood or Hector mode, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, no, I'm stupid. The fucking Merlinus one, huh? So yeah, they just wanted to throw... I was going to make the excuse that maybe they just wanted to put in a defense map, since they wanted to make, to spice things up and have a new defend objective, or a new clear objective. But no, we already had a defense map so in Eliwood and Hector mode. It was the Merlinus guidance, so... Yeah, I don't know. I really don't get what the point of this map is. It's a defend map. It's extremely easy. Even on Hector hard mode, it is really, really easy to just hunker down, put your guys in places where they can defend the throne. The boss can be a little bit threatening. He has a longbow, so it's extremely easy to accidentally bait him into attacking you. Although this is kind of what you want, especially on Hector hard mode, because on Hector hard mode, he drops a dragon shield. I did not manage to kill the guy. He's not Eubins. What's the guy's name? Seelin? Something like... Yeah, I don't know how you pronounce that, but yeah, Seelin, I guess. He drops a dragon shield. I did not manage to kill him. Which is a shame, because I would have liked that dragon shield, but also, like, I'm doing just fine. I'm not too worried about it. There is some nice stuff going on here. I mean, obviously, killing the boss is a good side objective. There are good side objectives in this map, and they're not, like, super easy to do. They're pretty easy, even on Hector hard mode. Again, on the other difficulties, they're obviously really, really fucking easy. But there's the boss that you have to kill to get the dragon shield on Hector hard mode. On Hector normal mode, he just drops a steel bow, so it's not worth it at all. But on Hector hard mode, you do want to go out of your way to try to kill this guy if you can. I actually forgot he had the dragon shield. Otherwise, I probably would have tried harder, and I would have probably gotten it, I assume. But, I'm just making excuses for myself, I guess. The other thing is that there's a thief that's going to go after some treasure chests. The stuff that's actually in the treasure chest isn't even really that good. It's like a silver axe and a men's staff, which is not, that's not fantastic, but it is what it is. If you want to go out of your way to stop that thief or to get the treasure yourself, like that's pretty reasonable. But yeah, I mean, that's basically all there is. You have to defend for 7 turns. This is not one of those, I don't believe, so there are a lot of defend maps in this game, and in the series in general, to be honest, but especially in this game, where you can end the defend map early by killing the boss. This is not one of those maps, I don't think. So killing Eubins, not Eubins, Seelin, will not end the map early. So you do have to wait the 7 turns no matter what. It's really easy to just clear out most or all of the enemies, and then it's basically an end turn simulator. But, I mean, I don't think it's bad by any means. I think that the objective... I mean, I think they should have made it harder, right? Like, I think they could have put more enemies in. This is Hector mode exclusive, so you are guaranteeing if they are playing this map, you are guaranteeing that your players have beaten the game at least once. They have experience with this game. You can afford to bump up the difficulty on normal mode, let alone hard mode, which requires you to beat the game 2 full times to unlock. Like, it really did not need to be as easy as it was. I mean, maybe I'm I should be careful what I wish for, because we are going to see later on in the game ways that they decided to bump up the difficulty in Hector hard mode in very cheap bullshit ways that I hate. So maybe I shouldn't be too quick to ask them to to bump up the enemy count or the enemy stats or whatever. It's a fine map. It's honestly probably better than most of the ones we've seen up to this point, in my opinion, just because I think the side objectives are like somewhat interesting, but it's too easy. Like that's really the big thing. There's not enough going on in these maps to make them feel interesting. Because the enemies are so weak that it doesn't require you to engage in any like particularly interesting or complicated strategies, which is a recurring theme, going forward in the series, right? Like Sacred Stones is like this, Path of Radiance is like this, where most of the maps do not require like particularly interesting strategies from you anymore because they got easier. And obviously there are going to be times where I have the narrative to fall back on, or the characters. But in this instance, not a whole lot is going on in that department. So yeah, chapter 15 is just kind of okay. Not the highlight of this episode for sure. They fight off the map ends just by saying like, oh, okay, we fought them off. Good job. We did it. And then they say they're going to go after Marquess Laus, but they don't, because the next map needs to start the same way it does in Eliwood mode. So it wouldn't make any sense otherwise. But yeah, it's fine. It's whatever. It feels like extremely just shoved in there for no reason, which I don't particularly like. All right, now moving on, I guess, to chapter 16, which is called The Noble Lady of Kalen. I'm going to be going off of Hector mode numbering from now on for the record, unless it's there's one more Eliwood exclusive map in that will be numbered accordingly, but for the most part, I'm going to be basing on the Hector mode numbering. So yes, chapter 16, Noble Lady of Kalen. There's a scene right at the beginning of this chapter, actually, that I quite like. Eliwood comments that it's kind of weird that despite the fact that things have really been popping off and, Laus has been doing all sorts of shit, Uther, Hector's brother, the Marquess of Ostia, the sort of the de facto leader of Lycia, just in case you needed a refresher, he hasn't done anything, which is kind of weird. Eliwood points out that that's a bit strange. Hector explains that Bern, which is a country to the east, I think northeast-ish, I don't remember, somewhere nearby, is kind of like on the prowl lately, and Uther thinks that if he shows weakness, if there's any sort of signs to outside places that there's any sort of conflict or strife going on, that Bern might invade. And so he needs to make it seem like everything's going on business as usual. Eliwood then says, well, you're his brother. Is it not, would it not seem weird or out of place the fact that you're not there with him? And Hector says, well, I have a bit of a reputation as like a no good sort of lout who just does whatever he wants. So it would be kind of weird if I was there, if anything. And I think if the conversation ended there, then they would just be kind of like a normal exposition conversation, whatever. But I really like this exchange afterwards where Eliwood says, you're not really proud of that reputation, are you? And Hector says, no, I'm not. It's really simple. I think what's important to remember is that like Hector is a very guarded person and doesn't really, he wears his emotions on his sleeve, but in terms of like heart to hearts, he's not a very open person. I think this scene just really basically my point is that I think this scene really illustrates very well how close Eliwood and Hector are, where it feels like Eliwood is really the only person maybe in the world, except for, no, honestly, probably especially not his brother, who can level with him like this and just ask him a personal question like that and have him answer it honestly. Which I think is neat. I think their friendship is like really cool, and I'm especially excited to get to their support together, although that's not going to be for a very long time. They receive word that Darin has attacked Kalen, and it's never explained why he did this. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I think if you want to be generous to the game, you can make some assumptions like maybe Darin needed supplies or needed a place to have his men rest, like unclear. But for whatever reason, he decides to attack Kaelin, and they being Eliwood and Hector, find out about it, and go to help, basically, because they're both, I mean, Eliwood especially is friends with Lyn, and wants to go help her. We cut to a POV of the Kaelin Knights, Sane, Kent, Will, Florina, and Lyn, who have escaped the castle, just barely. It seems like they just managed to get away from Darin's men, but they want to go back into the castle, or at least Lyn's thinking about going back into the castle, because her grandfather, Howson, is still in there, and they want to make sure that they can get him out alive, but they're not really sure what to do because they just barely made it out, so they don't think that it's going to go too well if they try to go back in. As fortune would have it, though, they receive word that Eliwood is nearby, or like relatively close. So the plan is to send Florina to go get Eliwood. They don't realize that he's already on his way. They just happen to know that. I think they overhear some soldiers talking about how Eliwood kicked them out of Laus, so they figure he must be in Laus, and Florina is going to go get him from Laus to see if he can help. Thankfully, though, he's already on his way, and Florina meets him. Honestly, they're already most of the way there, so it's just kind of like across some plains nearby. I really like the scene with Florina because they kind of have to, she kind of has to talk Lyn into letting her do it, because, she's still, Lyn dotes on her a little bit too much, but she's like, no, I am easily the best equipped for the situation. I have a Pegasus, I can fly over the trees, I'm the fastest by far, nobody else will be able to get there as quickly as I can. So eventually, she does talk Lyn into allowing her to go. She's very excited about it, and as she leaves, they kind of have a nice moment of reflection about how much she's grown, which is honestly really cool. I like Florina's character a lot. Especially in the supports and stuff, but even in the main story, they do a good job of characterizing her really well. There's a funny scene. I say funny in air quotes because it's not actually that funny. But as Florina's flying away, they try to shoot her out of the sky, and they succeed in so far as, they don't actually hit her, but they successfully knock her off of her Pegasus, and she falls and lands directly on Hector, which should kill both of them, but it does not. So, good for them, I guess. They managed to live. And that's basically how the map starts. I think this map is pretty good overall. The goal is to capture the castle gate, and you're kind of split up because Lyn, Will, Sane, and Kent are over in the bottom right and have some enemies sort of closing in around them. On Hector hard mode, there's some ballista. They might be there on Eliwood mode too, actually, but they're definitely stronger on Hector hard mode. There's also some Pegasus Knights that aren't there in Eliwood mode for sure, I know that. What's funny is that even with did he have a steel bow? I don't know. Will was not one-shotting these guys at range with the bow that he has equipped at base, which is just so fucking pathetic, man. I have the ×3 patch applied. Come on, just holy shit. But even on Hector hard mode, these guys fold without too much of a problem. I can imagine that it would actually be really tricky if you started Hector hard mode without playing Lyn mode first, because that makes both Sane and Kent are going to be pretty bad in that scenario, and obviously Will is always going to be bad, and Lyn isn't going to be particularly good, so you have to be really careful to not get hit by those, there's a mercenary and a myrmidon that are all coming around, and you gotta watch out for them. But with Lyn mode, one of your guys is promoted, and the other one is pretty good, probably, assuming that you put a little bit of effort into both of them instead of just hyper focusing on one. And Will is gonna have maybe a level or two. Lyn is gonna have some levels just kind of by merit of being around for so long. So if with Lyn mode, this section isn't particularly difficult. This map in general isn't particularly difficult. There are definitely some moments and some enemies that you got to watch out for. There are a lot of mercenaries in this map in particular, and they can be kind of difficult to deal with. Mercenaries and myrmidons, just because they're so fast. The cavaliers are pretty bulky, not like FE6 hard mode level, but certainly pretty bulky. So you definitely have to be careful. But with Marcus leading the charge and potentially your promoted Lyn mode cav, it's probably not going to be that big of a deal. One thing I do want to point out about this chapter, though, is actually one of the chapters that I would point to as kind of, I guess, evidence that Merlinus can be kind of hard to guard in some of the chapters in this game. I didn't really point this out in Chapter 14, even though I think, honestly, Chapter 14 is maybe the hardest one to keep him safe on, because there are Pegasus Knights that will just fly around you and go for Merlinus if they have the opportunity. Chapter 15 is like not hard to keep Merlinus safe at all unless you get pushed back into the throne room for some reason, but that's probably not going to happen. But 16 and later 17 are both pretty tricky to keep Merlinus alive on if you're not like... I mean, first of all, if you don't know that the reinforcements are coming, then you just get jump scared and probably, Merlinus is probably going to get killed. But if you do know they're coming, like, you can prepare for it, certainly, but it's not, like, foolproof because, especially in 17, there are a lot of guys, so... some of these maps definitely harder to keep Merlinus alive on than you might expect. But I have successfully managed it for every map so far. I don't foresee it becoming much of an issue. There are only a couple more that I can remember standing out as like as being hard to keep Merlinus alive on. I don't remember exactly which ones they are, but I think like 18 and 19 can be kind of tricky. 20 can be a little hard, I guess. But for the most part, after that, it's a pretty simple affair. Just thought I'd point it out though. It felt worth mentioning. Just thought I'd point it out though because it's probably not going to come up again unless there's a map that I want to talk about that aspect again at some point, which there might be. I don't know. As you go through this chapter, you might notice that some of your characters have talk conversations. Lyn has dialogue with every single character that you got in Lyn mode. So like Urk, Matthew, Sarah. Is that it, actually? That might be it, because most of them are with her, and then there's a couple we haven't gotten back yet, so it might just be those three. Maybe one or two I'm forgetting about, but there's some good dialogue here. I think the Matthew conversation in particular is funny, because he just outs himself as a spy, which is, I mean, kind of out of character for how careless it is, but it's still funny. Ooh, I just got pinged for some really good Sarah fan art that I might retweet later. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna go retweet it right now. So if you see my retweets, then you know that that's when I'm recording this episode. But yeah, once you get to the end of the map, the boss is a pretty plain affair, and you can capture the gate and start the process of recapturing Caelin Castle. There is some fun dialogue here, particularly of like Lyn, Eliwood, and Hector all meeting up. This is the first time that Hector and Lyn are meeting. And so Eliwood introduces them to each other. And Lyn immediately starts nagging him for, I don't know, actually. I guess just like being reckless. The way he fights is a little bit hectic, a little bit reckless. So she nags him a bit about how, maybe nag is the wrong word, but it kind of comes across as nagging, just talking about like how he needs to be more careful or his allies are going to get caught up in some of his attacks. Which is like, I mean, maybe not strictly wrong, but like really out of pocket considering that she just met him. Like that's like the first thing she says to him, basically. And like both of them kind of like call her out on it a little bit. Like Eliwood's like, that's a little bit much, don't you think? And Lyn's like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me. And I don't get this. I don't know what this is what they're supposed to be going for here. Is this meant to be like an indication that maybe they're like, the start of a romantic thing between the two of them? Because as you know, a lot of sort of romance arcs start off with the two characters being like antagonistic towards each other. That might be it. Oops, I retweeted it on the wrong account. There we go. Maybe I'll use that as my avatar at some point. Anyway, the only other thing that I can think of, and this is a stretch, but I also like have no better ideas. So maybe you guys can clue me in on why you think this might be going on. I was re-listening to some older episodes of the podcast, which I know is kind of lame. I feel self-conscious about listening to my own stuff, but I do think it's helpful because, especially in regards to like, I like to go back to them every now and again because it helps me to sort of remember where I was at in certain games, reminding me of some things that I've said in the past to see if I can like tie that into future stuff or like avoid mentioning it in the future if it's something that I've already addressed. There's a couple reasons why I like to do it. I don't do it like a ton, but every once in a while I'll go back and like binge a couple of old episodes. Now, the reason that I bring that up is because I was listening to the one where Aira, it's chapter 3, I think, of FE4, where Aira can have a conversation with either Lex or Holland to get a brave sword. And in that conversation, the one with Holland is pretty unremarkable, but the one with Lex, she is very antagonistic towards him for seemingly no reason. We're not given any amount of context as to why she would be doing that to him, and that's fine. That's not a big deal. I'm not saying that as any kind of criticism. But part of me wonders if it's meant to be I guess a callback to because I do think that Lex and Aira are very much where the inspiration for Lyn and Hector came from. One of them sort of like a black haired, or I guess a darker haired swordswoman, who's nobility, and then the other guy is a noble with slicked back blue hair and wields an axe, and he's a little bit more rough and tumble. I do think that is a lot, especially at the very least the aesthetic inspiration for Hector and Lyn came from, especially as the dynamic between them. As characters, obviously there are some pretty substantial differences. In fact, they're basically nothing alike as characters. But I definitely think there's a little bit of inspiration going on there, and part of me wonders if this was meant to be some kind of callback. But again, it's a stretch. But that's the only thing I can think of, other than, again, maybe they were just kind of pushing that, oh, hey, maybe they're going to have a romantic thing going on later, which they do. They are sort of pushed as a little bit at least as the canon couple of the game, between those two, whereas Eliwood is pushed together with Ninian. So I don't know. I just thought that was curious. There is a nice little reunion scene where all of the Lyn mode characters, all of the Kaylin Lyn mode characters, have a sort of a little bit of dialogue with Mark. There's a nice little scene where they all take turns saying something nice to Mark, "Oh, it's good to see you again. How you been?" All that stuff. And that's really all there is to the chapter. It's a pretty. I mean, definitely not as bad as last chapter in terms of how absolutely fucking filler it was. But it definitely not a lot substantial going on in this map either. I think the moment at the beginning for Florina is nice. But other than that, there's not really a whole lot there. But the gameplay, I actually do quite like this map. I think it's pretty good. Probably the best one that we've seen so far this episode, or maybe in the game so far. Although that's very quickly going to be. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but let's just say that the next couple of maps follow this up even more strongly. So, I didn't spend too much time entertaining whether or not this was the best map in the episode, because it absolutely is not. But it's pretty good. I like it quite a bit. One specific, before we move on, one specific thing that I wanted to call out here, I think that's worth mentioning about this map, is that it does a really good job of having you make use of terrain. It is a little bit excessive how many forest tiles are around. But between the forest tiles and cliffs and stuff that form natural choke points, it's a chapter that really makes you think about and be on top of your game in regards to terrain, more so than I think any other chapter up to this point, probably in the whole game. So that's pretty cool, and that's something that it has going for it even over the next couple of ones, because the next ones don't really feature terrain very much at all. And finally, to cap off this chapter, although I thought this was a little weird, because normally this is something that they would stick at the beginning of next chapter, but it doesn't really matter. There is a scene where we see Eliwood and Darin again. Housen, Lyn's grandfather, is also there, and Darin is sort of realizing in real time that this is going badly, and Housen tries to convince him to give up the ghost. He says, just surrender, stop trying to go with this ridiculous plan. If you surrender now and give up everything, then they will, if you ask for mercy, you will probably be granted it. And it seems like Darin is maybe starting to consider that possibility when Eliwood stabs Housen, and effectively kills him. And he starts entering this sort of really manipulative space where he's like, oh, well, you're in too far now, because now Hellman and Housen are both dead because of you. That's what Eliwood says. And Darin's like, but you're the one who killed them. And Ephidel's like, yeah, but I was doing it for you. So basically it's your fault. You really think they're going to forgive you after this? And basically just really, really manipulating Darin. He does still like pull back a little bit though. And lay on sort of he lays it on pretty thick, like but you're gonna be like a great king, you deserve to rule over all Lycia, no, all of Eliwood, or something like that. He's still gassing up Darin while also gaslighting Darin. he's doing the double gassing maneuver. And yeah, so he continues to have Darin strung along like a little puppet at the end of his rope, which is like, I do think that this is like, Darin's a fucking idiot, and every scene we've seen of Darin up to this point has been Ephidel barely doing anything, and just Darin being like the most obnoxiously stupid person ever. This is the first time that we've seen Ephidel like really do some good conniving manipulation, and I think it works really well. I just wish there was more of this, or that this was kind of like where the baseline was, instead of it mostly being Ephidel doing and saying basically nothing, and Darin still being like being bought on hook, line, and sinker. So yeah, I think that's about everything that I have to say. One last thing actually. After Housen is stabbed, Ephidel calls in a girl by the name of Layla. And tells Layla to go take care of the body, basically dispose of the body. And that's pretty much all we get. This is our first time meeting Layla, and she seems to be sort of like a new up-and-coming recruit in the Black Fang, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, so that's pretty much all there is, though, for this chapter. So we can go ahead and move along to chapter 17, which is called Whereabouts Unknown. They enter the castle. That's basically the opening narration and the beginning of the cutscene of this is they enter the castle. Lynn's worried about what's going on with her grandfather, so they need to infiltrate the castle and get them as quickly as possible, or recapture the castle so that they can find Lynn's grandfather as quickly as possible. Incidentally, this is where Merlinus will join you if you do not recruit him in chapter 13X. How did he get here in the middle of all the stuff going on with Laus? Fuck if I know, but he's here. So as you look at the map for this chapter, you're going to notice a few things. First of all, and probably most prominently, there is a cell, like a jail cell, in the sort of the middle right of the map that has some prisoners in it. And among those prisoners, I don't know if they show up in the battle preps. I assume they do. But there are a couple of named characters and have portraits and everything. One of whom we're not familiar with, but one of whom we actually are. So there's Lucius, who is a character that was in Lin mode. He's rejoining us here. And standing with him is a guy named Raven, who we are not familiar with yet. But he does look a fair bit like Priscilla, and in fact, if you use Hannah's augury here, she does tell you to bring Priscilla, or she says, what does she say? The polite girl, the flame-haired beauty. So yeah, that's pretty straightforward about who that's supposed to be. But yeah, you have to make it to the throne. And along the way, there are rooms with chests. There are plenty of enemies, some of which are pretty strong. The opening hallway is surrounded by archers, so you have to make sure that you're not getting ganged up by too many archers. They can do a fair bit of damage on Hector hard mode. They have steel bows, and that all that's just from the battle preps. So this is already like off to a pretty good start. This seems like there's a lot going on here. Incentive to kind of split up your army, although for the most part, it's less that you're like splitting up your army and more like you are like every once in a while, like someone will break off. Like Matthew has to go get the chests in the side area, and then someone has to go recruit like Raven and unlock or help the Kalen soldiers, which we'll get to. And then eventually there are also enemies that come from behind you, so you have to make sure that you leave someone behind or send somebody back to deal with those guys too. So honestly, there's a lot of little things going on in this map that I really enjoy. It's engaging. It keeps you busy. Overall, I think this is even just at first glance, this is a good map. But there's even more to it that I like moving into it. So this is a really solid chapter overall. I'm trying to think about how best to sort of get into talking about this. I guess, as you start the chapter, you start to move in. At the end of the first turn, the new guy, Raven, is going to talk to one of the Dane, not Dane, that's fucking, Tellius, one of the Laus soldiers, and say, hey, let me out of here. If you let me out of here, I will fight for you. Because I have a grudge against Marquess Ostia's younger brother, or he says he has House Ostia or something. Like he wants to take revenge on House Ostia. He knows that Hector is fighting against Laus, so he says, if you let me out, I will fight alongside you. Lucius seems to know Raven and tries to get Raven to not do this, but he ends up failing. And Raven goes ahead and does it anyway. He seems to care for Lucius though, because he tells the guard that if anything happens to Lucius, I will kill you, basically. So they seem to have a nice dynamic there. We're going to see a little bit more of that moving forward. So that is how Raven is let out of the cell, and you have to go and recruit him with Priscilla. Now, here's the thing about this map. Again, Eliwood mode, not really worth talking about. Hector hard mode is sort of where it's at. And, I mean, that's something I plan to address at some point. I don't really know when the best place to talk about that would be. Probably next episode, to be honest, but I do plan to spend a little bit of time talking about how inherently flawed this game is, in the sense of to play the only actually engaging game mode in this entire goddamn game, you have to beat it twice. Once on Eliwood normal mode, and then once on Hector normal mode to unlock Hector hard mode. And that's not even counting, if you want to do a playthrough on Eliwood hard mode, which isn't worth doing, but you wouldn't know that, obviously, if you haven't actually played the game yet. So I talk about all of these maps mostly from the perspective of Hector hard mode, because on Eliwood normal mode and all the other game modes, they're so easy that they're barely even worth engaging with. But, that, to be fair, that's, pretty much every map in FE8 is like that, and most of them in Path of Radiance as well. So, at least there is a game mode in this that is fun and challenging in most of the time anyway. But I digress. For now, focusing on Hector hard mode, this map is really, really fucking good. I've already talked about how, the way that it sort of gets you to break off from the main group, with a couple of guys. There's a if you aren't aware that enemies are coming from behind you, Merlinus is basically done. Rip Merlinus. He's getting his ass beat by I think it's a Nomad and a Cavalier spawn. Both of them, one each spawns for 5 turns in a row or something like that. There's a pretty solid number of them. What I kind of like about Merlinus, and something that I would have said sooner, as I was sort of breaking down what makes Merlinus, how he works and all that, but it didn't really even occur to me to word it this way until just now. I think what I like about Merlinus is that in the maps where keeping him alive is interesting, I really like him because he's basically an optional side objective in every map, just adding something new to do to the map if you want to, but if you don't, then you don't have to. And that's kind of nice. I think when you frame it that way, I think Merlinus is a good addition. I definitely think that it would be better if it was something other than your supply convoy, but that's I'll take what I can get. In addition to that, though, there are 2 baked in side objectives. The first one is obviously the chests. And honestly, they're pretty tough to get. Not the ones that are closer to your starting area. Those are super easy to get. But the ones that at the far top, those are hard to get. You need to be you need to be moving if you want to get both of those chests. There is a thief that will pop out of a room nearby. He will unlock one door. He will unlock a second door, and then on the third turn that he is out, he'll open the chest right up. So, and if he opens up both, then you cannot get both items, and both of them are worth getting. There's a silver sword and a hero crest in those chests, and then the other one I believe is is it a knight? I think it's a knight crest actually, and then the other one I think is a hero crest and a is it an unlock staff? Hold on, let me check. Yeah, okay, I got it right on all counts. So if you don't hurry, you're gonna lose one of either the hero or the knight crest or the silver sword, and both of them are pretty good. Obviously, the knight crest being the bigger one. Although, quite frankly, There aren't like realistically speaking, you might want to promote Oswin. That's completely valid. You might want to promote Lowen if you've been using him, and maybe if you really want to, if you got enough experience in the other Lin mode cav, maybe you want to promote them too. But honestly, the Night Crest you could probably just sell, which is I don't know how I feel about that. Like, this is the game maybe more so than any other in the entire series where like the options you have for Cavalier are like not that good. I mean, obviously, don't get me wrong, the best unit in the game is a Cavalier type unit. It's Marcus. But Marcus is already pre-promoted, so he doesn't need a Night Crest. You know what I mean? So like especially if you're playing like base Hector mode, without doing Lin mode first, like Hector hard mode. Lowen maybe, but other than that, like I can't really see like a good use for that Night Crest. So maybe worth selling, to be honest. The Hero Crest is the much bigger prize, because Raven is fucking phenomenal, but we'll get to him in a second. The other side objective that we need to take care of is, I mean, I guess these it is kind of two, but they sort of go hand in hand. Recruiting Raven and by extension, saving the green units in the cell. Because here's the thing about the green units in the cell, is that after a couple of turns, like relatively early in the map, they will open the door to their cell. They have stashed away a key that they can use to unlock the cell and break out. As soon as they do that, they are fucking dead. Because they suck really badly. And there are rewards for keeping them alive. In fact, I think there's a cutscene like at the start of the map where someone says we cannot expect them to fight. So you got to help them, you got to rescue them, do what you need to do to make sure that they don't fight. But they are determined to fight for you unless you actively pick them up with a mounted unit or somebody, and force them to not fight. They will fucking go ham on you. Or they will try to go ham on the enemy but fail. What's funny is that if you look at the map, they have to walk down a hallway through a room that has like archers and shamans on the other side of a wall that will shoot arrows and magic at them and just kill them because they're like really weak and get doubled super easily and take a ton of damage. So if you do not get there before they bust out of that cell, then you can basically guarantee that at least one of them is going to die. I mean, for that matter, Raven will just kill one of them, or all of them if he will fight for Laus and kill the Kalen soldiers if that's what he feels like he has to do. He won't attack Lucius, obviously, but yeah, no, he will go after those soldiers. The reason why you want to keep these guys alive is you need to keep at least one of them alive in order to get access to a guided chapter. However, you get an additional item on top of that, depending on how many you manage to keep alive. If you only manage to keep one alive, you get a mine. If you keep two alive, you get a light rune, which we've had a couple of those so far, and they just it hasn't come up yet because they're just not. I mean, they're not very useful, quite frankly. But it is. We'll probably talk about them at some point. I don't know exactly when, but I guess if it becomes relevant at any point, I guess we'll talk about it then. But if all three of them manage to survive, then in addition to getting the guided chapter, you will get the red gem. However, the most important thing is the guided chapter, and for that you only need one of them to be alive. So theoretically, if two of them die, it's not that big of a deal. The red gem is nice, but it's not the end of the world if you miss out on it. But yeah, definitely want to make sure that you get to Raven in time and rescue the soldiers before they can walk down the suicide hallway and get riddled with arrows and dark magic. Raven, you need to recruit him with Priscilla, who is his sister, which by itself I actually also really like because whenever and it was the same thing with Klein in FE6 chapter 11, well, a couple chapters, but the one I'm thinking of, chapter 11A, where you can recruit him with Clarine. You can also recruit him with Roy, but you can recruit him with Clarine. But you want to be careful if you're going to recruit him with Clarine because you don't want her to be on the front lines. You don't want to run ahead off on her own. She does need to be escorted to whoever the character she's recruiting is, because otherwise she's just going to die. So I think that needing to go fast to make sure that Priscilla gets there in time while also making sure that you hold back enough where you can guard her and protect her, that's a pretty fine line to thread. And I think that that's a lot of fun. Making sure that you're doing that balancing act is really nice. Um, Once she manages to get to Raven though and talk to him, he will join your group. Because he likes Priscilla. Like he understands that Priscilla is working for Hector, and even though he doesn't like Hector, he is going to team up with him so that to make sure that Priscilla is safe. It is implied that he may be like trying to like get close to Hector so he can kill him later. But it is not that nothing ever comes of that fully. I think that's explored more in some of his supports, which, by the way, he will be in the next SSS episode that we're doing. So look forward to that. At least I think he is. But and then if you have Raven go into the cell, Lucius will still be there. He's still a green unit. When the other soldiers escaped, he said that he was going to hang on until Raven came to talk to him. And if you go and talk to him, then you will recruit Lucius back as well. We've already talked about Lucius. I don't remember how much I said about him in Lin mode, but the main thing you got to know about Lucius is that he's pretty low level. Especially if you don't do Lin mode, but if you do, then you can get some levels on him. But either way, he's not going to be super high level. However, as soon as you get him to level 10 and promote him, he becomes a bishop, and he gets C rank stabs at base, which is great. So he is like by far your most consistent staff unit, probably other than Priscilla, and I guess Sarah, but like Priscilla probably more prominently just because she's going to be the one that you're using more often, most likely. So yeah, and then I think he has higher magic than both Priscilla and Sarah. So he is going to be really good at using like the warp staff and things like that. He is basically the most consistent warper until you get pent. Which actually, when do you get the warp staff? Do you even get the warp staff before you get pent? I don't remember, but either way, it's still nice to have somebody that can if nothing else, like physic, rescue, things like that. It's not all about warp, guys. Come on. Sometimes it's about the other utility staffs as well. I did kind of skip over talking about Raven, though. I wanted to make sure that I gave him enough of a runway here, because Raven is really good. So Raven is a mercenary. We've seen a couple of them so far. They haven't really been like a mainstay in the series at this point. I don't think they even existed until I guess FE4. But like if you want to get like really technical with it, you could say they didn't even exist until FE6. So, depending on how you want to look at it, not a particularly, not like a mainstay class in the series until like a game or two ago. But they're basically like more balanced mercenaries. They usually are a little bit stronger, and a little bit bulkier, but usually not quite as fast. Now, of course, in a game like FE6, where enemies are quite strong, that makes a big difference. So like that's why Rucker is so good in that game compared to like Deke, who I also think Deke is good. But Rucker is so fast; he can outspeed a lot of like fantastic, like a lot of like bosses and fast enemies. He's honestly like really good. But in FE7, where enemies are quite weak, the threshold of speed you need to double most enemies is like way lower. So Raven is going to be able to do it. He gets hard mode bonuses, so on Hector hard mode, he's even stronger. When you promote him, he becomes a hero, which is really good. But also, like obviously, like it's good for the stat increase. But also, he gets hand axes, which in FE6 didn't fucking matter at all, because hand axes were so bad in that game. But in this game, hand axes are arguably the best weapon in the entire game. And the fact that he gets them on promotion makes him pretty strong. The only real thing you can argue that's holding him back from being like one of the best units in like, especially like just straight Hector mode without doing Lin mode at all. I would argue the only real thing that holds him back from like top tier status in that context is the fact that he starts off at level 5, which it means it does take him a little bit to get to a high enough level to promote. But once you get him there, he becomes a hero. He can use hand axes. He has really good stats. He is fantastic. And honestly, even just like being able to use like regular axes, like iron axes and steel axes, like his con is not like super high, so he is going to get slowed down, but he's fast enough where he's still going to be able to double a lot of enemies with an iron, and then later on probably even steel axes. So it's like he packs a really powerful punch overall, Raven is a really fantastic unit and definitely worth adding to your team. Again, especially if you are just playing Hector mode without Lin mode sort of going into it. A couple things I wanted to point out before we move on from this sort of like duo of characters. I thought it was really funny because when you recruit Lucius in Eliwood mode, maybe not even in Eliwood mode. I think it's just like when he gets his light tome, because when the soldiers bust out of the cell, they give him a light tome and say use this to defend yourself if something happens. When you get that, it gives you a fucking tutorial for the Trinity of Magic, which is basically just the weapon triangle. The Trinity of Magic has existed in basically every since FE4, since the weapon triangle has existed. Basically, in that game, there were especially in I don't remember if the double triangle existed in both Yggdrasil games, but there was the triangle. There's two magic triangles basically. Some of them exist in some games. Some of them exist in other games. And then I think in one or both of the Yggdrasil games there are both, where lightning magic is good against fire. Fire is good against wind, and then wind is good against lightning. And then separately from that, anima magic, the elemental magic, is good against light, which is good against dark, which is good against anima. In the GBA games, which is something I don't think I really talked about this much in FE6. Maybe I mentioned it once or twice, but the different types of elemental magic sort of all got like condensed down into one type. Fire and thunder and any wind-based magic. Like in FE6 we had Air Caliber. Those all would have been like separate elements in the Yggdrasil games, but in this one they're all condensed down into just the anima affinity, or the anima weapon type. But they also expand the options for both light and dark magic, since those were kind of like they were a good amount of light and dark options in both of those games. But the number of users you had for both, especially dark magic, was like non-existent. So they expand that a little bit in the GBA games, which is nice. But yeah, the main reason I wanted to bring attention to that is because it's a fucking tutorial in chapter 16. If you're playing Eliwood mode, which is the only place where this shows up. I know I'm playing Eliwood normal mode, so like theoretically it is the first time I am playing through the game, from the game's perspective. But come on, like, didn't they? I could have sworn they mentioned that in Lin mode at some point, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Doesn't matter. No, you know what? I gotta stop saying that, because sometimes it does matter. Damn it. Sometimes it does matter that I'm getting a tutorial ostensibly 16 chapters into the game. Like, fuck off. It's stupid. And then one thing I did just want to like touch on the recruitment conversation between Priscilla and Raven in a little bit more detail. Because Priscilla, first of all, she calls him Raymond, which is not his name as we see it. Apparently he has discarded that name and is now calling himself Raven because he's edgy and cool. It seems like I don't think we get the full details in the story at any point. This whole plotline never goes anywhere in the story, like the main story, but in supports we find out a little bit more. I think it's implied, even within this conversation, that for some reason House Ostia is responsible for the death of his parents, and it's never explained precisely how that came about or why he thinks that, or if it's true. I don't think so, at any rate. If it does come up, I completely forgot. Maybe it'll be addressed in one of the supports. I'm not actually 100% sure, but I guess we'll see. But yeah, I wanted to give that a little bit more detail because I realized I kind of glossed over that and wanted to make sure that I was giving full context to his character. He doesn't have any kind of conversation with Hector, which you think he would, but whatever. Okay, yeah, so once you save all the soldiers, you get all the treasure. The enemies themselves aren't too bad, as long as you're not like overextending too much. There's a shitload of enemies that come out of that little room in the middle, where the thief spawns, and there's the archers, and the room where the soldiers suicide themselves. But once you can make it past all those guys, the boss is pretty easy. And yeah, you beat it, you capture the throne, and you have beaten chapter 17. And this is where I would describe this as being sort of a turning point in the story, because up to this point they've been pretty aimless and directionless. Eliwood is looking for his dad, but has not had any concrete leads. They were really only checking out Laus because it seemed suspicious that he was preparing for war, and then they attacked him, so they were kind of pursuing him, and it's been kind of wishy-washy as to like what exactly is like the point of all this. Is this actually getting Eliwood any closer to saving his dad? Really unclear. At this point, though, it's all established, like, where we're going from here in pretty explicit detail, which I think is good. I think maybe that should have happened a little bit earlier. I don't know if this Laus arc really needed to be 7 chapters long, but, it is what it is. Basically, what happens here is that Layla, the girl from earlier, the sort of up-and-coming Black Fang member, approaches Eliwood and Hector. It turns out that she is actually a spy for Ostia, working directly in the Black Fang. Which is kind of weird that they must have known about the Black Fang. Why did they think to have a spy set up in the Black Fang to begin with? If I don't know. I don't fully know. Actually, I gotta check the script now because I can't remember. Did Hector know? Like, obviously Hector recognizes Layla, but did Hector know that she would be on this job? I actually do not remember. Let me check that. Okay, yeah, no. So Hector did not expect to see Layla here. He did not know that she had been assigned to spy on the Black Fang. It seems like Uther was independently looking into Elbert's disappearance, which kind of puts into perspective sort of the stuff that was going on in Chapter 11, where Hector was like, I need to go help Eliwood. I need to go help him find his dad. And from Hector's perspective, Uther wasn't doing anything, which was weird because, Elbert and Fere were like very trusted allies of his. So Hector couldn't really understand why Uther was being so like nonchalant about the whole thing. This kind of explains why he was doing something. It just wasn't immediately obvious, which I don't think Hector ever really like reflects on. But I think it's interesting, and I kind of wish that they spent more time on it and paid a little bit more attention to it. So Layla takes them into the back room. But it turns out that Hausen did not actually die. When Ephidel told Layla to dispose of the body, she, took him and into the back, and he is still alive. He's receiving treatment currently as they speak, which is, I don't, I'm not going to say that it's bad that he survived. It feels a little weird, it seems like it'd be a good opportunity to, like, kill him off since he's so old anyway. I'm pretty sure he dies in Lynn's ending no matter what. So I don't know. He should live the longest life possible. It just seems like it would be a good narrative moment to do that. So I don't know. Doesn't matter though. So yeah, as I mentioned, Layla has been looking into the disappearance of Eliwood's father. And basically she kind of info dumps everything that she's learned from Ephidel. It's implied in this cutscene, and then, later on in a chapter we're not going to be talking about this episode, we do find out explicitly that, like, Ephidel bought her act hook, line, and sinker. Like, she is a really fucking good spy. Well, okay, maybe not, because she, we'll get to that another time. But she, for the most part, she is a really good spy. Like, Ephidel has no suspicion of her whatsoever. He actually quite likes her. And so he has given her a lot of information that seems a little bit strange that she has access to. But I guess Ephidel sort of just like spilled all the beans on it. Basically, she says right up at the front that she thinks Eliwood's dad is alive. Hector celebrates by saying, "Woo, Hector!" What does he say? He says, "Woo, Eliwood!" Which I think is funny. I think it's just a fun line. It's like that one. Is the Ace Attorney? Is the Ace Attorney Edgeworth saying "Woo"? What is it? Woo, gumshoe! I'm really not kidding when I say that this is where we get all of the exposition on the fucking Black Fang. Essentially, I'll summarize it here as best as I can. The Black Fang was an organization of assassins. I mean, they still are, but previously they were an organization of assassins that only targeted corrupt nobles. That was their main thing. Like, you could come to them and pay them. Sometimes it actually seems like they would do it of their own accord. They would. You could hire them to kill nobles who abused their powers. They were honestly almost seen like heroes, basically. They were still assassins for hire. But they only ever really took out people who you could argue deserved it. Now, here's what we get told in this cutscene, and I say that because it is actually extremely inconsistent with stuff we find out later, but you're just gonna have to trust me on this. This is what we find out. So, we learn that Brendan Reed, who's the leader of the Black Fang, remarried. Don't know what happened to his first wife. Presumably she died. But he remarried. And once he remarried, things started to get bad. They started attacking and basically killing anybody as long as you were willing to pay them. So now they were going after arguably innocent people, or certainly more innocent than what they were targeting before. And it seems like Brendan Reed, I don't know if they go this far just yet, but basically what they're getting at here is that it seems like Brendan Reed has basically lost control of the Black Fang, and the Black Fang is not really under his command anymore. Instead, it is this new wife of Brendan Reed's that seems to be calling the shots. It seems that behind her, there is a sort of a figure, commanding even her, and his name is Nurgle. Now, Nurgle we actually have heard about before. Nurgle was mentioned in Chapter 7 when the Black Fang showed up to get Ninian and Nils. One of the guys comes up to Nils and says, "It's back to Nurgle with you," or something like that. So we have heard of Nurgle before. It seems like he is the one who is controlling this mystery woman, who is in turn controlling the Black Fang by extension. This is also where we find out more about Ephidel. There's nothing really here that we didn't already know. He's kind of a weird guy who seems to be manipulating Darin pretty substantially. But she does say that she's never seen Nurgle. She doesn't know anything about what Nurgle's like, just that he exists. She tells them, and this is kind of where the kicker comes in, she tells them that Marquess Ferre, Elbert, is alive, but he is on she believes that he is on a place called Valor, which is also colloquially known as the Dread Isle. We're not given a whole lot of information as to exactly why, like how it developed this reputation. I really wish we were. I mean, like, once we actually go there and like start to find out more about it, it becomes relatively obvious why, I think. But for the most part, I do wish that there was more detail given as to like why people didn't like Valor. All we really find out is that people who are, it's said that anybody who goes there never comes back is essentially what the deal is. And so they're like, damn, that sucks. We don't know how we're gonna get there. But I guess we'll figure that out when we come to it. Eliwood, basically says, you don't have to do this. You guys don't have to come with me if you don't want to. Hector obviously says, shut the fuck up, I'm coming with you no matter what. Lynn also says that she's coming with him. And they kind of have a little bit of a back and forth. They have a nice moment here where Lynn says, like, I know what it's like to lose a parent. It's awful, and it's not a pain that I want you to experience if you can avoid it. So yeah, there's that's a nice moment. I do like that. It's one of the few moments that Lynn actually gets to be a good, interesting character in the story. Honestly, coming up on a couple chapters of her being a character. I don't know about a good character, but certainly a character. But then after this, especially like after chapter like 17 or 18, she basically stops being relevant at all, from what I remember. So who knows though? Maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised as we go through. Now, there's another great scene here that you only get if Matthew is alive. Matthew and Layla are, it seems like they're basically dating. I mean, like, they kind of, like, have a nice rapport with each other. Seems like it could be, flirting. It seems like it could just be they're good friends. But then he basically invites her to his hometown so that she can meet his parents. And from that point, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, no, that's where we're at with this. It's nice. I think that they're a really cute couple, basically. I think that they're very cute together, and I like them a lot. Unfortunately, they don't get a lot of screen time together. This is basically all they get for a while. But this is, yeah, I think it does a good job of conveying the relationship that the two have. She makes a joke about how like he takes off before she could even like say no, basically. But she clearly seems to enjoy it. Like it seems like it's reciprocated. A couple of things I want to comment on before we move on from this chapter. In regards to the last cutscene, there was actually something that I skipped over by accident. Eliwood, she's telling them about sort of like everything that's happened up to this point. Darin starts talking about wanting to throw a rebellion. It seems like Hellman, Marquez Santaruz, did seem genuinely interested in actually going through with the plan. That's never really expanded on in any meaningful detail. That's fine, obviously, like, it doesn't really matter. But I am kind of interested, but, like, it can be left up to interpretation. That's fine, too. She does then say, though, that Eliwood's dad also seemed to support the plan. All she says is that he, like, showed up and said, like, hey, I'm going to join your rebellion. We do know that there seems to be, like, some questions of, like, you know, how loyal he really was. Like, what, like, was he mostly just trying to get Darin away from Effidel? But, like, why would he care if he wasn't also interested in the rebellion plan? I actually kind of like that some of these questions aren't answered, but I do wish there was a more of a payoff here. Ultimately, though, what I think is... what I wanted to point out is that there's nothing from Oswin here. And I get that they did already kind of address the whole, like, is Elbert a traitor? Should we continue to help Eliwood if that's a possibility? And they already resolved it. Oswin said his piece, Hector said his piece, and Oswin eventually backed down. But I would have expected him to at least have, like, something here, maybe, like, saying something to himself, or maybe, like, bring up that conversation again. I don't want them to retread the same ground, obviously, but they could at least say, like, oh, we're, we, like, say, like, oh, we've already talked about this, Oswin, I'll hear no more of it, or something like that. But I think Oswin would have more of a leg to stand on here now that they have this information from, like, a trusted source. So I don't know. I would have expected a little bit, or at the very least, they could have saved that conversation until they got to this point. I think that probably would have made more sense. But, you know, I guess we'll, I just would have expected something from Oswin here. You know what I mean? But we don't really get anything, which seems strange to me. One more miscellaneous thing that I forgot to mention before we move on from this chapter. I can't imagine, like, there is dialogue in the game for you to open the door to the cell with the prisoners in it. I think technically it's possible. It seems very, very unlikely that you're actually going to I mean, maybe on like a normal mode playthrough you'll get there in time to actually open the door. I've never seen it myself, and I actually don't know. I didn't realize it existed until I actually saw the script as I was looking through for this episode. If you open it with Will, Sane, Kent, or Lynn, or Florina, they all have unique dialogue that changes. They'll have a bit to say. You can also see the same dialogue, though, by talking to them once they are out of the prison cell, so you're not missing out on anything. Really, you can talk to them with anybody here. Okay. Really good map. I like this one a lot. The side objectives are really nice. It has a fun sort of like flow to it. I think the recruitable characters are a lot of fun. Overall, great map. I had a great time with it. I would say this is easily the best in the game so far. However, it's gonna have its work cut out for it beating the next one, because next up we're doing chapter 17X, which is called the Port of Badin. So, I honestly don't think this chapter should have been skippable. I think that this should have been a mandatory chapter, because it adds some context to a couple things. Lynn's character especially gets it gets fleshed out here. It's also, like, it introduces Fargus, who is, like, a pretty important character later on. And it also has the only dark magic user in the entire game, or at least the only, like, dark mage in the entire game, is in this chapter, and it's just completely missable, which seems weird to me. So overall, I think they probably should have just made this chapter mandatory, but it doesn't matter. It's pretty easy to get anyway. It's just a bit weird to me that there are scenarios where people will, they're just going to go straight from chapter 17 to chapter 18 with no bridge there, because chapter 18 starts with them on the fucking ship that they're taking to Valor. And it seems weird that they would just like, oh yeah, no, wow, I'm sure glad we found that crazy pirate crew who was willing to take us to Valor. Although now that I say that out loud, it sounds kind of based to just have that be sort of just don't provide any additional context. That's all they say. That would be pretty funny, honestly. So maybe I'm onto something here. Maybe they were onto something, I guess. However, if you do go to Chapter 17X, then you'll sort of see the process of them actually getting passage on the ship. They're running into a problem, which is that no one wants to take them there. Valor is, it's called the Dread Isle. People are terrified of it. No one actually wants to go out to the Dread Isle. So what do? Well, they have one option left on their plates. They could go to pirates. Pirates, it seems like pirates are generally like pretty reviled in this world. I mean, we're not talking about the One Piece pirates, right? Like, it seems like they're basically just explicitly water brigands, right? Like, they kill people, they steal things. They are not good people. But if they want to get to Valor, it seems like that is basically the only option. Lin, the fact that they're even considering this makes Lin get really mad and storm off. And Eliwood speculates it's because her parents were killed by bandits, and pirates and bandits are basically the same thing. So, she says, like, we can't even entertain the possibility of trusting them. She does eventually get over this pretty quickly, which I think is nice. I do see people criticize Lin for this, when I don't think that's really fair. I mean, we see... I think her reasons for this are completely understandable. And once she cools off, she does come to the conclusion that, like, this is what they need to do. So I think it's pretty reasonable. However, Eliwood and Hector are not perturbed by this. They decide that they are going to, go on alone to meet with a local pirate captain named Fargus. There's a bit of a thing here. I think it might be a localization thing, where I think Hector calls him like old man or something. And he's like, you should call me captain. And then they're like, wait, should we call you captain? And he's like, no, you're not my crewmates. You shouldn't call me captain. Call me Fargus or whatever. It could be a joke that was just translated poorly. I don't know, but it made me laugh. It made me giggle. They offer to take Eliwood and Hector for like some ridiculous sum of money. I think it was like 10,000 or 50,000 gold. It was some crazy amount. They obviously don't have that much money, so they have a plan. And I think both Eliwood and Hector, like the chapter POV, is different here. But they both come up with the same plan. Like, if it's in Hector mode, Hector comes up with the plan. If Eliwood mode, Eliwood comes up with the plan. Both of them have the idea that they are going to take the money that they do have. They're going to pool it all together. And they are going to arena grind, basically. They're going to bet it all at the arena. And then they will make enough that way for Fargus to pay Fargus to take them to Valor. What I thought was interesting here is that Eliwood basically just says, we'll take the money that we have on hand right now, whereas Hector says, we got to go back to Ostia to get some things that I can sell to use that money to arena grind. It feels like, they added an extra step there for no reason. The reason I think they did this is because in Hector mode, money is a lot tighter. You don't start with any money, and theoretically, it's possible that you just still have $0 if you didn't have anything to sell. If you never got any of the red gems or anything like that, theoretically, you could just have no money. And so I guess they want to include that in the story as a way to be like, oh, see, even if you have no money, it's not a plot hole. They're going to go get more money. I don't know. It seems unnecessary. I don't think anyone would have cared or even noticed if they had just said, like, we'll use the money we have on hand. But I guess they thought it was important enough to put in that extra little bit there. So Fargus is based as fuck, though, actually, and he sends out a guy. I think it's Dart. I don't remember. Dart comes up to Eliwood and Hector and says, all right, listen, the captain changed his mind. He is not going to charge you money. Instead, we're going to play a game, and if you win the game, then he will take you to Valor. The game is that you need to get across town and talk to Fargus. And if you can do that, then you win the game. They also make it very explicit that you should not attack Fargus, because if you do, then you're fucked, and he will no longer talk to you, and you are effectively, not effectively, you are literally game overed, because you can no longer talk to Fargus, and therefore you can no longer clear the map. So how does this map actually play out? Well, your goal is to get to the other side of town and talk to Fargus, as I said. You have two ways that you can sort of go about this, and it's pretty simple. The structure of the map makes it very obvious what you're supposed to do, but you are still given some choice and some freedom here that I think is very welcome. Essentially, if you try to go through the center of town, you are going to be assaulted by a million pirates. There's quite a few of them, and they're quite strong. Their stats aren't actually particularly good, but they have really, really good weapons. They have killer axes. They have, I think one of them has a devil axe. There's a killer bow in there. One of the mages has an L-fire, right? Like, they're very strong weapons. And so the idea is that you're supposed to avoid fighting them if at all possible, and instead go around the top. Up top, there are like a couple of really weak pirates that you can go through, and you can completely circumvent the center of town. You don't have to engage with the tougher pirates at all, and you can just talk to Fargus that way. Now, the thing about that, though, is that if you do that, you're missing out on a lot. First of all, there are houses that you can get, one of which has a recruitable character. You can actually get most of the houses without triggering the pirates to attack you, because you need to enter like a certain radius for them to attack you. I do not think you can actually get all of them without triggering the pirates, though. I think there's one that if you want to get it, you have to trigger the pirates. And then also, like, there's basically, especially if you just got Raven, you're gonna want to kill some guys here and get some good experience for your units. And these guys are tough, but they're certainly not unbeatable. So triggering them and having your units fight them to get experience is honestly not a bad idea. So those are basically your two options. You can take the slower, easier route and just talk to Fargus. You can fight through the pirates in the middle, or you can do something in between, and kind of bait them a little bit, just to make sure you get all the houses and stuff, and maybe you don't necessarily want to fight all of them, that sort of thing. Eliwood, Merlinus is pretty easy to keep alive in this chapter, in my opinion, since you can, like, the choke points here, like, the houses make narrow alleyways that you can use as choke points, which is really cool. I like the layout of this map a lot. There is also, just to throw an extra wrench into things, a paladin mini-boss shows up, and is sort of just chilling there with the pirates. On Hector hard mode, and I think Hector normal mode as well, he will always just immediately go to attack you. On the Eliwood modes, if I'm not mistaken, he will only be baited with the pirates. He's pretty tough. I think he has like a silver lance or something, or maybe even like a killer lance. He's tough. I think it might be a killing edge. I'm not sure. But he can be strong. So you're gonna want to bait him with like one of your toughest units, like Oswin or Marcus. And even then, I'm pretty sure that they still face a chance of death from him. At least Marcus does, I think. So yeah, you want to be careful there for sure. Thankfully, especially on the Hector modes, because you fight him on like turn 2 or 3, it's really not that much of a hassle if you need to reset if he kills one of your guys. It's a pretty early thing that you can just you can deal with pretty quickly, and then if it becomes a problem, you can just reset. Unlike the pirates that you usually don't bait until a little bit later in my experience at least, and then you have to deal with killer axes, critting you and killing you, forcing you to restart right before you would have won the map, which is always annoying. But to be fair, it's entirely self-inflicted. You do not have to fight those pirates if you don't want to. So there is we get our Anna and Jake reference here for the game. Anna appears in basically every Fire Emblem game. Sometimes she is a minor NPC. Sometimes she only appears in like menus and tutorials and things like that. In this game, she is obviously in some games, especially the more recent ones, she is a fully playable character. However, in this game, she is only a minor NPC. She works at the bar in the next chapter, in this chapter, and she doesn't give you anything. She unlocks an extra scene next map, essentially, but it's just for flavor. It doesn't add anything. If you visit the bar, basically, she'll tell you that one one of the pirates is her boyfriend, or her husband, something like that, and that they're very happy together. So yeah, you get a nice little scene next chapter if you visit this bar here. I will be sure to mention it next chapter. We get a recruitable character here. His name is Canas or Canis. I've always said it Canis. However, as soon as I started entering like the online Fire Emblem spear, I guess that fits better actually. The online Fire Emblem sphere. I've heard it pronounced Canas more and more. So I'm probably gonna call it Canas. But I am more used to saying Canis, so who knows? Maybe I'll switch back and forth. Canas is a dark mage, and I have actually alluded to his existence before. I bring him up basically every time dark magic and dark mages are brought up in this podcast, because I think he is like the best one, like narratively, and maybe the entire series. He's so funny. He talks about dark magic as being like an ancient elder type of magic, and then he says, well, some people call it dark magic, but I think that's a very biased term or something like that, which I just think is so characterful. Dark magic as a concept in Fire Emblem is something that is so underutilized, and this is by far the game that spends the most time with it, and even then, like, it definitely takes, like, it's not as thorough as I wish it was. I think you can also argue that, especially in like some of the supports in FE6, it gets explored a little bit as well. But for the most part, I think that most of those supports only really like have meaning, and you can interpret like meaning for dark magic into it through the lens of this game. Like the concept of dark magic in FE7 honestly adds so much to the concept of dark magic in FE6 retroactively, which is one of the few things I think this game like adds on to its sequel or adds on to its prequel really well. Whereas most of the time it's just kind of like neutral or net negative, if you ask me. But the way that dark magic is handled in this game is fucking awesome, and I love it. And Canas is a great representation of that. As a unit, Canas is fine. I personally, I think he's the worst of like the trio of sort of like magic users. That being, of course, Urk and Lucius, in addition to Canas. The main thing about them is obviously they get Lin mode to get levels, whereas he does not. However, he's certainly not bad. He has decent stats. He's a bit slow at base. But he is, he can still avoid getting doubled. He may double like soldiers and armor knights and things like that. And the main thing with Canas is actually he gets a shitload of speed on promotion. So he can start doubling more consistently once he promotes. Especially if you promote him maybe a little bit early. I don't remember what level he joins at. I think it's like 8. So if you promote him at like level, maybe level 10, but maybe like 12 or 14. He can get pretty fast, and he can start killing enemies pretty consistently. And yeah, I mean, it's not, the thing about dark magic in this game is that it's mostly not very good. The main dark magic you're going to be using is Flux, and it's basically like slightly better fire or thunder or lightning or shine. It's like smack dab in the middle of all of those, probably. It's certainly no thunder. Thunder is just really consistently good. And like lightning and shine are both fine. Flux is probably about as good as both of them. I think it's stronger and heavier than lightning, but weaker and lighter than shine, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know that for a fact though. Light magic in this game is just really weak, whereas dark magic is like on the stronger side, so that's kind of nice. Obviously, you're not restricted in which magic units you can use, though. If you want to use Urk and Lucius and Canas, feel free. And then once he promotes, he promotes to Druid, sort of like what Nime was in the last game. And he can use staves too if you really wanted to. I don't think that staves are his main selling point personally. He can use them, especially in the context of like an LTC, right? Like he's good for like staffing. I think he starts with, I can't remember if he starts with E or D when he promotes, but either way, you're mostly just going to be using it for the odd heal. Maybe once you get him high enough, you can have him use torches and stuff. I don't see why you, like in a casual setting, I don't see why you wouldn't just like have Lucius do that though. I don't know. Canas is good. Canas is a fine unit. I don't like using him always. I think he's a lot of fun. I like him as a character. I think he's probably my least favorite to use of the three magic boys. But that's just me. Your mileage may vary. You also get a Devil Axe in a nearby village, and the Devil Axe has shown up in a couple of... I think it was in Thracia and FE6. I don't know if I've properly explained what it does. It sucks in those previous two games, though, because it doesn't really have any kind of benefit, whereas in this game it actually does something. So basically the Devil Axe, it's a powerful axe, but the drawback is that it can sometimes damage you. It is usually a flat percentage chance to proc minus your luck stat. So, like, I don't remember. I think it's like in this game it's like 20 minus your luck stat to backfire on you, or 30. So sometimes it'll do damage to you. Both hit and crit are applied. Well, I don't think it can ever. I don't remember. All I know is that you can crit yourself with a Devil Axe, and it will backfire on you. And it's really funny when it happens. If you get the funny like crit animations, especially for like warrior, and it does a shitload of damage to you instead. Or if you kill yourself on a wall, that's always funny. Especially in like FE8 when you have like Dazla, and Dazla will say, "I couldn't have asked for a better ending" after he kills himself on a wall. That sort of thing. I haven't brought it up before now because they're just so useless in Thracia and in Binding Blade. But in this game, it introduces a nice gimmick. It only really works this way for this game and the next one. There is another game, maybe two, where the Devil Axe is good again, and it's the DS games. So we'll talk about that when we get there. But for this game, what you got to know is that the Devil Axe actually gives you a shitload of weapon experience. Meaning that if you use it a few times, you can get from like E rank in axes to like D and C and B and A rank in axes really quickly. I've used it to, like, I think in one of my playthroughs I had Kent promoted to Paladin. And he starts with either E or D axes. I don't remember which. And I decided that for fun, I had like 2 or 3 chapters left in the game. I really wanted him to get to S axes so that he could use Basilicos, just for fun, just for the memes. And I did it. I did do it because the Devil Axe just gives you weapon experience that quickly. The more you use a weapon, the more weapon experience you get. Most give like 1 or 2 points. I'm pretty sure the Devil Axe gives like 8. So you can get up there very, very quickly. Once you actually get to the side of the map that has Fargus in it, there's a couple things you want to make note of. First of all, there is an arena here, and you can arena grind. There's something up with this arena. I don't actually know what it is. Let me see if I can find anything on it. I seem to remember. Okay, I don't know where I heard this. It could be wrong. I could be thinking of a different map. But there seems to be something up with this specific arena where, like, the enemies in it are, like, particularly strong. I did do a few rounds in this arena and didn't see anything, like, particularly weird. It was still, like, on par with what I would expect for the most part. So, I don't know. I might be misremembering. I might be working off of bad information. I don't know. I tried to look into it just now a little bit to see if this came up anywhere. I'm not seeing anything about this specific arena being bugged. I've heard that it has something to do with Fargus, like because Fargus is so strong, it throws off the calculations of the enemy stats or something like that. I don't actually know if that's true or not. So take it with a grain of salt. I remember hearing about it somewhere though, and yeah. So definitely, if you know what I'm talking about, definitely let me know. So you can tell me I'm not crazy. There's also a character here named Dart. Did I just call him Dirt? His name is Dart. Dart. I have mentioned him before. Actually, he is Dan. He is Rebecca's brother. Although he does not know it, he has amnesia. And so that comes up in a couple of their supports. I haven't done Dart's SSS episode yet, but I did do both Will Actually, just Will. I don't think I haven't done Rebecca yet, so that'll come up at some point. But he is a recruitable character that we can get later on. Actually, just in a couple of chapters. The thing is, though, if you kill him here, he will not be recruitable later on. So make sure you do not kill him here, thinking he's like a mini boss or something, because it's a pretty reasonable expectation, I think. But no, definitely don't kill him because he is recruitable. Fargus himself, you have the option to talk to him. You also do have the option to attack him. In case the promise of soft locking your game and game overing was not enough to dissuade you, if you actually bring up the battle forecast for anybody with Fergus, you will see that he has like ridiculously high stats. He has like final boss level stats. He's like a level 17 berserker, so he has really high crit. Obviously like fucking phenomenal like defense and res, all that stuff. So you would not most likely not fight him unless you misclicked twice, once to actually attack him and then once to start the battle once you have the forecast up. So I very much doubt you're going to do that by accident. On purpose, though, it is very funny to like save state and then fight Fargus just to see what happens. If you do manage to survive the round of combat with him, which seems actually, I think, obviously, if he kills the guy, I guess this happens too, unless it's a lord. But the turn will continue. But then I guess at the beginning of your next turn, he'll be like, oh, I offered to help you and you attacked me, fuck you, and that's when you game over because he's no longer willing to take you to the Dread Isle. Yeah, but if instead of doing that, you talk to him, he honors his end of the agreement. It seems like it's one of those situations where you didn't actually kill his guys. Maybe you did. Maybe he's just that psychotic. Because Dart dies if you kill him here. So maybe all the other guys are dead. I don't know. But you kill basically his entire crew, and he's just like, that was awesome. I'm going to take you to the Dread Isle now. That's basically where the chapter ends. Nothing else really goes on here. Lynn, before the map starts, Lynn comes out, and she actually is kind of like talking to herself before she notices what's going on, and she says, well, I tried to find somebody else, but I wasn't able to, so I guess pirates really are the only way. Which is why I don't think it's really reasonable to be too harsh on her here, because she just needed a little bit of extra time to come to terms with it. Probably like maybe an hour, not even. So I don't know. Like it wasn't too bad if you ask me. All right, and that's where the chapter ends. And I have a tough decision to make here. What is the best map out of this episode? I have two real contenders here. Obviously, based on how I've been talking about these chapters, you can probably guess which ones they are. But it ultimately boils down to me between chapter 17 and chapter 17X. I think both of them are a lot of fun. I think that 17X is more like potentially interesting, but it also has like a really kind of boring out that you can take. That honestly, it's just such a cool concept for a map that it makes me want to give it the dub here, but I don't know if I should do that. It seems a little bit unreasonable. I'm not 100% sure. I think I'm going to give it to chapter 16. Or sorry, not chapter 16. Chapter 16, Eliwood. But chapter 17, Hector, Whereabouts Unknown. I think that's probably the best chapter in this game up to this point. I do think it's close. I think chapter 17X gives it a run for its money. I also think that even chapter 16, Hector, gives it a run for its money. I think both of those maps were a lot of fun. I enjoyed playing through both of them. But ultimately, I think 17X is over a little bit too quickly. I think it's a little bit too easy to cheese, both by going around obviously the long way. But even it's not that hard to beat the pirates in the middle. It doesn't feel like that much of an ordeal. And then once you do that, the map is basically over. It kind of tricks you into thinking the map has more going on than it really does, which I don't think is a bad thing necessarily. I think the mental sort of decision of what to do with the pirates, I think is a good framework for a map. It's just, if you know what you're doing, it's really not that hard. It might take you a reset or two if you get crit by a killer axe, but it's like fine. And once you do that, then there's not really a whole lot else going on. So that's what holds 17X back, in my opinion. Um, so yeah, gonna give it the chapter 17 here. Congratulations, chapter 17, and definitely I think it blows chapter 13X out of the water. 13X, I do like 13X. I think if it wasn't Fog of War, I think it might be like a contender for one of the better maps in the game. But because it's Fog of War, and just because like it's when it's so early on, you don't have a lot of tools at your disposal. It can be really frustrating. I don't think it's actually that good of a map. It was just that we were so down atrocious for good maps at that point that I kind of just gave it to it regardless. But yeah, now that we're actually starting to hit the mid game with its good maps, I'm very excited. Next episode in particular has some really good maps in it that I'm really looking forward to. Two in particular come to mind. I think, ironically, both the one that we're starting with and the one that we're ending with next episode are both fun, enjoyable maps that I'm excited to talk about. But yeah, we will see. My voice keeps cracking. It's tired. It's late at night, and I've been recording for like an hour and a half. So my voice is starting to break down a little bit. So we'll keep the rest of this pretty quick. I'm not really seeing any new Fire Emblem news on Serenus Forest. There is a new Engage manga stuff happening. I don't remember when I uploaded my last episode, but that might have even been the Engage manga is coming out. Basically, the volume 2 of the manga adaptation releasing March 4th. So it's already out. Actually, it's been out for a couple weeks now. So yeah, if you're interested in the Engage manga, go check that out. I haven't really been doing that much in terms of gaming. I have been watching some anime. I watched Mobile Suit Gundam, the original Mobile Suit Gundam. I might have actually already mentioned that. I did also watch Vinland Saga, which is a great anime that I highly recommend. That is actually it. I haven't actually played any new games since the last episode. I did pick back up Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and I'm probably going to end up beating that. I ended up... So I have a friend who's playing through the whole Xenoblade trilogy, minus X, rip Xenoblade X. But he's playing through the whole Xenoblade trilogy, and he got the 3, and he was starting to play it, and I was like, there are parts of this game that I really liked, and maybe I should go back and give it another chance and finish the playthrough that I started. And long story short, I ended up deciding to do that. I'm pretty close to the end now. I only have like one chapter left. I'm on chapter 7. And I want to do some of the side quests before I finish, like some of the hero and ascension quests before I finish. So that's going to take me a little bit longer, but I am pretty close to being done with that. I can't say that I love it. I don't think it's that good of a game personally. But I'm having a fun enough time. I think the gameplay is really good for the most part. There are things I don't like about it, but for the most part, the gameplay is really good. It's really just the story and characters that hold it back for me. I don't think it's a particularly great cast of characters or a particularly interesting story. But I do know people who really, really like both the characters and the story. So maybe you would disagree with me. I don't know, but it's a fine game. I enjoy playing it well enough. But I certainly am not going to hold it up as one of my favorite RPGs of all time or anything like that. It's not my least favorite Xenoblade game, because Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a piece of shit, and I fucking hate that game. But it's not great. It's fine. Give it like a 6 out of 10 probably, but I'm getting ahead of myself because I haven't actually beaten it yet. So that'll probably end up on my 2024 games I played in 2024 list. Not the list I do at the end of the year, because that would probably only be like my top ones. But the list I have on backlogged of the games I'm playing in 2024, it'll probably get added on there at some point. But yeah, all right. Well, that's all that I had. I sure hope I didn't forget to do anything. I hit the map gauntlet. I hit the news and personal stuff. Yeah. I just got to get this edited. I more so than usual, I have a lot of dead air in this one because I would just like zone out for like minutes at a time. So the raw audio is going on 3 hours. I honestly think that's going to get cut down to like somewhere between 2 and 2.5 hours. But we'll see. Anyway, I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.